Live from Toronto, Canada, The Conspiracy Show with Richard Serring from Zoomer Radio, AM 740.
And welcome to the Audio Imaginarium. Come on in, weary traveler. Hang your cloak on a peg, grab a stool, and come gather around the fire. There are stories to be told, and you are among friends. Carlos Cagina is the technical producer, and Ryan White is the live stream producer. And yes, we are live streaming this radio program on my YouTube channel, Strange Planet. That's it. You can watch the radio program on the live stream YouTube channel, Strange Planet. You can see me in my home studio here in Thornhill, north of Toronto, where it is great to be home after a month away in Greece. And I was bouncing back and forth between Kalamata and Athens. And here I am now in quarantine for the next 14 days. Well, I've done 5 days of quarantine, so another 9 days left to go. So last month we had two great guest hosts, Ali Siadatan and Don Jeffries. I want to thank them both again. I think that I thought they did a terrific job. And then last week, I pre-recorded the show when I was in Greece, but I'm back live tonight, live radio, as God intended it. David S. Brody is an attorney turned best-selling author. He writes terrific books, fictionalized accounts that examine pre-Columbian America, and his books are really suspense thrillers. I think David has written now about 16 novels. He's just, in the last 2 weeks, published his latest, Sheba's Revenge, which deals with, among other things, the legend of buried treasure at Canada's fabled Oak Island. And David is standing by to discuss here in just a moment. In the second hour, Charlie Robinson is a writer, humorist, social critic, podcaster. He'll be with us. Charlie has a relatively new book out called Hypocrisy, and you have to see the spelling of it. It's the actual spelling is hippo, H-Y-P-O, crazy, C-R-A-Z-Y. So it's hypocrisy, surviving in a world of cultural double standards. And he'll discuss the difficulty of navigating the current cultural climate due to constantly shifting moral values, cultural double standards, a dangerous consolidation in the business community, and the whole strange woke agenda. All right. Are you all ready to get into some Oak Island? Let's do it. David S. Brody is an 8-time Amazon best-selling fiction writer and the author of 60 novels. Actually, I think this bio might be a little outdated. I think David is more like 10-time Amazon bestseller. We'll find out in a moment. His children call him a rock nerd, because of the time he spends studying ancient stone structures, which he believes evidence exploration of America prior to Columbus. A graduate of Tufts University and Georgetown Law School, David has served as a director of the New England Antiquities Research Association. He's an avid researcher in the subject, again, of pre-Columbus exploration of America. He's frequently appeared as a guest expert on documentaries airing on the History Channel, Travel Channel, PBS, and Discovery. He's a longtime resident of Westford, Massachusetts, and a native of Laconia, New Hampshire, and he currently resides in Newburyport, Massachusetts, with his wife, sculptor Kimberly Scott. David S. Brody, welcome. How are you?
Richard, thank you. It's great to be with you again.
Likewise. So I mentioned 8-time Amazon best-selling, but I think that's outdated. Is it like 10 now, or a dozen times you've topped the Amazon best-selling list?
It is up to 10. Thank you for mentioning that. Yeah, it's been a fun run. These books, this whole idea, I think, of the history of America not really being told, has really captured people's imaginations. And they're fun, and so people tend to read them, and I'm appreciative of that.
And you you have sort of stayed away, if I'm not mistaken. I mean, you've sort of hinted at Oak Island in previous books, maybe a certain artifact found there as maybe examples of, the fact that the Romans were around obviously pre-Columbus. But this is the first time you sort of have put more of a focus on Oak Island, if I'm not mistaken, right?
Yes, that's a very astute observation. I have stayed away from it, mostly because so many other people are talking about it and writing about it, and I didn't at the time really think I had anything original to say. And then I started digging down a little bit, and I don't know if you know of an author by the name of Zena Halpern, who passed away a few years ago, and she's been a frequent guest on the Curse of Oak Island show. I was very close with her, and I ended up with a lot of her notes, and she had written a book very quickly before she passed on and was planning on doing a sequel. And from those notes and from other things I found, I finally sort of stumbled upon some information about Oak Island that I thought was worthy of writing about. And so I, like everyone else, took the dive into Oak Island. And, my wife said, "Why'd you finally do it?" And I actually quoted to her a great quote I had read, which was that, all old men dream of finding the little child within who still believes in buried treasure. That's sort of why we all are so interested in Oak Island. I think we all love the romance of the buried treasure, and I'm the same. I just can't get enough of it. I sit there once a week and I watch it, and I don't really ever find anything, and yet I turn it on again a week later, and I'm just fascinated by it, like so many other people are.
Right. And just tell us a little bit about the main protagonist in this series of books, Cam, and he's been. How many books has Cam been sort of featured in?
This is his 13th.
His 13th. And he's kind of a middle-aged archaeologist, investigator, but there's something new in his life. He's recently widowed in this book.
Right. So the widowing happened a couple books earlier, and boy, did I get some nasty, fan mail from ex fans who were upset. He had been with Amanda for 10 books, and it was just one of those things. If you have people running around getting shot at all the time, at some point it just doesn't seem realistic if they always survive. It's like the old Batman series. Batman and Robin always survive, but we were little kids back then. So I decided to have the tragedy, and then he moved on, and he's now with a sort of interesting, exotic Mossad agent, and that has allowed me to tie in some other geopolitical subplots into the stories, which is what I did with this. It's Oak Island, but it also ties into some turmoil in the Middle East. But yeah, so he's sort of just recovering and starting to dip his toe into dating again. Right.
Now, so in the book, Cam is approached by a TV producer who wants to explore Oak Island yet again, and has a new way, sort of a new technology he wants to employ. I guess it hasn't been tried before, and it's based on the Boston Big Dig project.
Right.
So, because they really have, aside from finding a few artifacts here and there, they've no one has ever been able to uncover the legendary gold that's supposedly at the bottom of the money pit. But this idea that this TV producer comes up with, and he wants Cam to basically, before he goes and spends $10 million to perform this big dig on Oak Island, he wants to confirm that there is Templar treasure there. But this idea that
he doesn't want it to contribute to the money pit. He doesn't want to be the next guy to throw his money down the pit.
Right. So, but this idea that this TV producer comes to Cam with, based on the Boston Big Dig, I mean, is there some validity to that? Would this be a new way of excavating? I mean, it would just excavate the entire island, right?
Right. So it's called the Slurry wall excavation, and you wouldn't even need the whole island, but you could basically take. Let me go back. So what Slurry wall construction is essentially you dig a big pit and you insert a slurry formula of material, and there's partially liquid and partially solid, and you basically freeze it, and those frozen walls then prevent this pit from collapsing on itself. Because one of the problems with the Oak Island money pit is that There's a lot of water in there. There's a lot of voids because so many people have dug there so often, and you can't really dig too wide a diameter of a hole because it will just collapse on itself. But this is a technique that was used, as you mentioned, when they did the big dig depressing of the central artery in Boston, and they were dealing with wet soil conditions, and this is what they came up with. And so this is not, unique to I'm not an engineer. I didn't come up with this. So other people suggested doing it up there at Oak Island. The problem is it's very expensive. It's an expensive technique. And so the producer in my book basically says, I don't want to drop $10 million into this unless I'm fairly certain that we think that Templars were here with their treasure. Otherwise, it's not worth it. And so he retains Cameron Thorne, and says, look, you're the Templar expert. You got to tell me if this is a good bet. I can't ask for 100% insurances. I understand that, but were the Templars here? And if so, is it possible that they left their treasures here from King Solomon's temple or otherwise before I drop all this money into this thing? And so that's sort of the trigger to get the book going. He retains Cameron to go up there and give his best guess as to what's going on the island.
Right, and so that leads us to, and this is pretty controversial too. But before we get into the whole Middle East thing, in terms of Solomon, let's talk a little bit about Sheba, which is the namesake of the title of the book, Sheba's Revenge, Queen
Right.
Sheba from Ethiopia. Who was she?
So I've always been fascinated by this story because every once in a while you'll hear usually your aunt or your grandmother say to somebody in the family, well, who do you think you are, the Queen of Sheba? And I'm like, who is the Queen of Sheba? Well, so the story that you get, and it's written in the Old Testament, basically she lived at the same time as King Solomon, and as King Solomon was very powerful in the Middle East, of course, and she was also powerful in her own right in Ethiopia. She was described as bold, beautiful, and brilliant, but she, like other leaders, traveled to Jerusalem to pay homage to King Solomon, to meet him, to gain from his wisdom, to diplomacy, you would call it. But part of the culture in her country, in Ethiopia, was that she needed to remain a virgin while she ruled. And so she said to Solomon, who was attracted to her, you have to promise not to violate my chastity. And he said, that's fine, I agree to that. But he also wanted to. So what he did, he basically tricked her. He said, I will agree not to come to your bed if you agree not to steal anything from my palace. And she said, well, of course, I'm not planning on stealing anything. What he did is he served her the night before she left a big banquet in her honor, and he made sure all the food was very salty and spicy. So she woke up in the middle of the night and reached for a water jug which said property of King Solomon on it, and in the darkness didn't realize that and gulped from the water jug. And Solomon, waiting in the shadows, said, aha, you violated your oath to me, so I can violate my oath to you. And so different versions of this story are told. So either he seduced her with a trick, or he date raped her. Basically, he took her against her will. Either way, what ended up happening was she became pregnant, and she had a son named Menelik. And about 20 years later, Menelik came of age and decided to return to Jerusalem to visit his father. And Solomon, to his credit, welcomed Menelik with open arms and actually asked him if he would stay and rule by his side. And Menelik said, thank you, Dad, but no, I need to get back to Ethiopia and rule with Mom. I'm the heir to that throne. And Solomon said, great, I understand. What I'm going to do for you is I'm going to send with you the sons of my best cabinet members, my best ministers, so they can advise you just as their fathers have advised me. And Menelik thought that was great, but the sons were not too happy about it. They liked their life in Jerusalem and did not want to go to the backwaters of Ethiopia. And so they conspired to steal the Ark of the Covenant, basically saying, if we have to leave, we're going to take the Ark of the Covenant with us. And so they left with Menelik with the Ark of the Covenant. And when Solomon learned of this theft, he gave chase. And the story, that story is not told in detail as much in the Old Testament, but there is an Ethiopian historical source called the Kebra Nagast,
Right.
which goes into great detail of how this chase occurs and the escape route. But eventually, the Ark of the Covenant, according to many sources, ended up in Ethiopia, and according to many sources, it's there today. But that essentially is the story about Sheba and Solomon. That's how the Ark of the Covenant ended up in Ethiopia. And if you read even today, to this day, the Ethiopian Constitution declares that the king of Ethiopia shall be the bloodline of this union between Sheba and Solomon.
Right. So the up until recently, I guess, the leaders in Ethiopia were they could draw a direct line to Menelik, the son of Solomon and Queen Sheba. Wow. Amazing.
Right, and then I think it was in the 70s. I think there was an uprising. It might have been later that there was an uprising within the last generation or two, and that's no longer the case. But for many decades or centuries prior to this, exactly the leader of Ethiopia could trace their bloodline all the way back to 3,000 years ago, about 900 BC.
And then there was an airlift because there was a civil war in Ethiopia, and Israel airlifted, I'm not sure how many Ethiopian Jews back to Israel, and were they also then descendants from Menelik?
They were probably descendants of the advisors sent to advise Menelik. Remember, I mentioned the minister's sons.
Right.
And so that's one of the theories as to how the Ethiopian Jews ended up down there, is that they descended from these advisors.
All right, so the other sort of subplot or main plot in Sheba's Revenge has to do with the location of ancient Israel, and this is where it gets controversial. Yes, because, well, you explain what one of the characters in the book discovers about the location of ancient Israel.
Right,
ancient Jerusalem. Ancient Jerusalem.
Ancient Jerusalem, yeah. So even today, if you just open up a Wikipedia page and read about Jerusalem, one of the first things you read is that there actually is no archaeological evidence of Jerusalem going back to the time of King Solomon, which is really shocking, because Solomon, if you read about what he built the temple, of course, a palace, a hall of justice. He had 5 or 6 major structures, and they were the center of all this international trade, and it would be as if centuries or millennia from now, people were looking for evidence of Washington, D.C., and could not find the Capitol building or the White House or the Supreme Court or the Smithsonian building. It's almost unbelievable to think that they wouldn't be able to find evidence of any of the great structures of Washington, D.C. It's the same thing in Jerusalem. There's no evidence whatsoever of any of Solomon's structures in Jerusalem. And so a lot of Arab sources have been arguing for about 40 years now that the true Jerusalem of King Solomon's time period is not in what we call Israel today. Instead, it's in Western Arabia, Western Saudi Arabia. Now, of course, if that were to be true, that would call into question the whole Jewish claim to the Promised Land. I mean, if the Promised Land was not really if Jerusalem wasn't really in Israel, then the Promised Land is not Israel, it's Western Saudi Arabia, which, of course, nobody wants, it's just desert. And so Arab sources have been sort of kicking this idea around for a while, and Israeli archaeologists have been desperately trying to find some kind of evidence that supports the claim that Solomon's temple really was in Jerusalem, and have not been able to do that so far. The reason it becomes interesting in light of the Sheba and Menelik story, as I mentioned earlier, that Menelik and his ministers with the Ark of the Covenant escaped from Solomon, and the Kebra Nagast describes their escape route. And if you read the escape route, it makes absolutely no sense if they started in Jerusalem in Israel, but makes perfect sense if they started in what we'll call Jerusalem in Arabia, the spot that a number of Arab sources believe it should be. Place names and how fast they could travel and how many days it would take and when they would cross the Red Sea and all that stuff. It just makes no sense if you leave from traditional Jerusalem, but it makes perfect sense if you leave from Arabia. So that's the combination of the lack of archaeological evidence and the detailed escape described in the Kebra Nagast sort of gives some life to this possibility that Jerusalem really wasn't in Israel. The story would be that the Jews were exiled during the Babylonian invasion, or I think it's 587 BC, around 600 BC,
right.
that they spent 70 or 80 years in Babylon, which is modern Iraq, and that when they were finally freed, that's when they went to modern-day Jerusalem, a few hundred years after Solomon. And at that point, we do start to see archaeological evidence. The idea being that nobody during the Babylonian exile remembered where the real Jerusalem was. So when the leaders said, "Hey, we can't go back to the old Jerusalem because it's no longer we're no longer welcome there. We need to go to a new Jerusalem, but we need to sort of tell the people that it's the old place, so they're excited to go. But no one will know the difference. We're just going from no one's old enough to remember it, so we're going to go to a different one." And so they go to the modern day Jerusalem around 500 BC instead of 800 BC,
right?
And then start seeing archaeological evidence.
We got to take a quick time out, David. Sorry, we got to take a quick time out here. We'll come back and discuss further, and we will link this back to the legendary treasure of Oak Island. David S. Brody is with us. He's got a brand new one called Sheba's Revenge, and we're talking Oak Island, folks, right here on The Conspiracy Show. Don't go away.
Loose lips sink ships, and sometimes corporations. Got something to say? Call Richard Serrett now at 416-360-0740 or toll free at 1-866-740-4.
Here's a resolution for 2021. Reduce stress and enhance your immune system. ESS 60 from C60 Evo. C60 is the carbon-60 molecule known to deliver more than 172 times the power of vitamin C. 172 times. ESS 60 is the purest form of C60, a known antiviral, antibacterial, and anti-inflammatory remedy that works. ESS 60 neutralizes free radicals from cell metabolization and external toxins to help minimize inflammation and maximize detoxification. Further, people report better sleep, more energy, and renewed mental clarity when they take our ESS 60 organic oil. To order your miracle molecule ESS 60, go to c60evo.com/Richard-Serrett. c60evo.com/Richard-Serrett. Buy now and save 10% by using the coupon code EVRS at checkout. Again, use the coupon code EVRS at checkout.
Widest range of carpets in the city. It'll floor you.
It's carpet market. Charles was the best wingman. He never forgot his special date. And he always brought me flowers. He could be hard on me, but that's why he was a good dad. I miss those long fishing trips together. He really was.
World's greatest grandpa.
At Mount Pleasant Group, we'll help you celebrate every part of them.
Big Brother is listening, and so are you, to The Conspiracy Show with Richard Serrett from Zoomer Radio. To speak with Richard, call 416-360-0740 or toll free 1-866-740-4740.
And we are back with David S. Brody. The brand new one is Sheba's Revenge. He's also the author of Pillars of Enoch. That's pretty recent as well. Watchtower of Turtle Island, Romerica. I think that's the last time we spoke, David, when you wrote when Romerica had just come out.
Yeah, I've been pushing these out pretty quickly the last couple of years. During the pandemic, I've done every 6 months. I've been releasing a new one. So,
wow!
But I think you're right. Last time I spoke was Romerica.
That's right. Oh, before we get going again, I just want to give a quick shout out to a couple of my Patreon supporters in the Star Chamber tier. I want to thank Deep Paul and Tim Sullivan. Deep Paul and Tim Sullivan, thank you both so much for your generous support. And if you're interested in becoming an official supporter of this program and all of the work that we do here, you can go to patreon.com/Strange Planet. Patreon.com/Strange Planet. Again, Deep Paul, Tim Sullivan. Your generosity is greatly appreciated, and I'm very humbled by it. Thank you so much. All right, so we were talking about Queen Sheba, and also evidence that ancient Jerusalem was in Western Saudi Arabia. Although I have to say, I don't necessarily believe that. I mean, there is some. It's an interesting argument. I think about 10 years ago, they found some defensive walls in Jerusalem, and right around where they believe the first temple would have been located, and there were they were pretty thick walls, and I'm not sure, several hundred feet long, and there was a gatehouse and different things. And it does mention, I think, in First Kings that Solomon built these defensive walls. So I don't know if that's the smoking gun, if that's the archaeological evidence that would prove that Jerusalem was located in Israel or not. However, it's they keep digging and hoping to find more, perhaps.
Right. I mean, there are hints at it, but there's not nearly as much as you would think.
Right.
Again, if the structures that Solomon built were as elaborate as have been described, you would think it'd be very easy to find them, and we're just not finding them. And so there's other like other little hints about this. For example, I don't want to get too deep into the argument, but there's a whole thing about when Moses is wandering in the desert, he's in the Sinai desert for 40 years wandering, and he runs into his father-in-law, Jethro, Zipporah's father. And that story always never made any sense to me either, because if you're wandering in a desert as big as the Sinai, it's about the size, about 2/3 the size of the state of Maine. I mean, you don't just wander around and run into somebody. I think a more realistic story is that he went looking for his father-in-law, who happened to live in, not in the Sinai, but in Median, which is in Western Arabia. And because Jethro was the ruler in that area, and that Moses had been exiled previously and had gone, and that's how he met Zipporah, when he was in Western Arabia, Median. And so he went looking for him. So instead of wandering around, he said, well, instead of wandering a strange desert, I'll wander over to this other desert where my father-in-law is, and he'll be able to give us supplies and some land. And that story, and there's a Mount Sinai there, just like there's a Mount Sinai on the Sinai Peninsula. That story sort of holds water. And then more specifically, we get to the point where they finally decide to stay and settle, and the book of Joshua goes into specific detail, painstaking detail, about how land is given to each one of the Jews who are wandering in the desert. This amount of land, and described here, given to him and him and him and him and him. And the one thing that's shockingly missing in this is that Moses' sons, are given nothing. They're not mentioned at all, which is a really, shocking occurrence. So why would Moses' sons be left out of this? What suddenly occurred to me, the reason they'd be left out is if this land was owned by Moses' father-in-law, Jethro, and they were divvying the land up and dividing up some of the land and giving it to everybody, there'd be no reason to give it to Moses' children, because they're going to inherit it anyway from their grandfather. So it would be like the king giving out land. He wouldn't give any to his sons, because the sons get everything that's left over, everything that wasn't divvied up. So that's another sort of piece of this argument, is if you read the book of Joshua, it's very strange that Moses' sons are not accounted for in the land distribution. So yeah, it's another evidence. But yeah, right. So it's still an open question. And the point in my book that I make is that Israel doesn't want this to be a debate. Understandably, they sort of the whole basis of the Promised Land and the Holy Land and all that, they just don't even want to have the conversation. They don't want to dignify it with a response. And so in my story, once this starts to percolate, the Mossad gets involved and says, we need to end the story now. And the way that they decide, one of the ways they decide to do it is they say, hey, if the Templar gold is really buried at Oak Island, and the Templars got their gold from Solomon's temple in the early 1100s, which most people agree they did, then we can test that gold and prove by one of two methods. One is basically every gold mine has sort of unique fingerprints and attributes. The mineralogy of every gold mine is different, so we would know where the gold came from. And then also we can tell when the gold was poured from its molten form into some kind of mold. There's a helium test that can be done. And so if we can prove that the gold that came out of Solomon's temple is indeed 3,000 years old, then this whole argument goes away, because it would prove that it comes from Solomon's temple, and Solomon's temple is where the gold came. Everything falls into place.
Right,
and
right.
So that's how the Mossad gets involved in the Oak Island mystery. They want to get gold and use it to prove that this whole argument about Jerusalem and Arabia is bogus.
So is that true, that you could determine the location, the exact location and the time the gold coins were minted using, you mentioned helium? This is all technology that's available today?
Yes. So all gold contains traces of uranium and thorium. When they decay, they produce helium. I'm getting in trouble here because I'm not a scientist. But when gold is put in its molten form, the helium is lost. Once the gold cools, the helium's locked in again. So you take a sample of the gold and melt it down again, and then you can determine how old the helium is. How long has the helium been locked in the gold? You can ascertain it by measuring its rate of decay. So I can't, but this is done in a lab, and this is a technology that allows scientists to determine the age of gold objects. This becomes very important when you're trying to determine, if you're a museum, for example, whether something is some kind of forgery. A gold, was it real? Did it really come out of an Egyptian tomb, or is it a 19th century or 20th century fake? And so this technology becomes very important. But it could be used if gold were to be discovered at Oak Island. We could use it once it's been poured. We can date the, as you said, the time of minting. If it happened to be a coin, or if it was just a candelabra or a goblet, we could date go back to the time of when that was poured, and that allows you to basically determine the origin of the object.
Well, that's remarkable. So then the key to proving the location of ancient Israel or ancient Jerusalem in Israel lies thousands and thousands of miles across the Atlantic in the money pit in a little island off the coast of Nova Scotia.
Well, again, all this presupposes that the Templars really did find Solomon's gold under the Temple of Solomon in the horse stables back in the 1120s or whatever, and that they did indeed bring it to Oak Island, probably after they were outlawed in 1307 or maybe before, and that it still is there, that they never actually took it and did anything else with it, but there it is. So all this is, we've got a number of jumps we have to make, but I write fiction, so I can have some fun with it. But that's how those two subplots link together, how the Sheba story links back to Oak Island.
That is a great premise, David. I mean, wow.
Well,
fantastic. So
right, and there's some strong evidence at Oak Island. I mean, there's in particular, I'm guessing this would be your next question. I don't want to jump the gun on it, but coconut fibers have been carbon dated, and the coconut fibers come from these flood tunnels, and there's 3 different carbon dating tests, and they all come back in the 12th century dates for the coconut fibers. The coconut was used to filter the flood tunnels, the box drains along the beach, so that they don't get clogged up for these flood tunnels. And there's really no way for the coconut fiber to make it to Oak Island, because of course coconuts are not native to anywhere near Oak Island, other than they were brought there by somebody in the 12th century. Now, who's out there sailing the oceans, crossing the Atlantic in the 12th century, other than the Templars? I mean, it almost has to be the Templars. So there's strong evidence with the coconut fibers that there was a Templar presence on the island, and there's also the lead cross that they've made a big deal of in the last couple seasons. Again, 12th century, and they've tied that lead cross to other Templar-related sites in Europe as well. But There's lots of dates at the island that are later than that, but of course it's the earliest dates in my mind that are the most important, because that establishes who first settled on the island or first deposited treasure on the island, and then later dates are just more people coming over either to check on it or to remove it or to add to it or whatever. But the original dates, at least 12th century dates, and they tie in the two of the dates, for example, 1185 and 1180, are smack dab in accordance with Zena Halpern's research of a journey to the Catskills and Oak Island, 1179 to 1180.
We'll get to that when when we come back. David, we'll take a quick time out. David S. Brody is with us, and we are talking about Oak Island. The book is Sheba's Revenge. Back with more in a moment. Don't go away.
Peering into the shadows where the truth often hides. You're listening to The Conspiracy Show with Richard Serrett from Zoomer Radio.
Hey there, I'm hard at work on another edition of Inner Sanctum, my free monthly newsletter. Inner Sanctum features my monthly brief, a column of my thoughts and opinions on what's happening in the world. It features a spotlight on a past guest, a look ahead to an upcoming episode of my weekly syndicated radio program, The Conspiracy Show. It features a look at this month in conspiracy and UFO history, and my Conspiracy Unlimited podcast episode pick of the month, and so much more. To get your free monthly newsletter, Inner Sanctum, delivered to your email inbox, just go to my website, strangeplanet.ca, strangeplanet.ca. Scroll down to the bottom of the page and click on Inner Sanctum and register. It's fast, easy, and again, absolutely free.
Okay, we know there's a thing called andropause or male menopause. How can we deal with this male change of life?
Well, Steve, our Androforce product helps men control their testosterone and cortisol levels. Very important. So with Prairie Naturals, Prosforce, and Androforce, you've got an excellent start on your prostate protection program.
Look for Prairie Naturals active formulations for men's health. Prosforce and Androforce are available wherever natural health products are sold.
William Ashley's iconic 46th Holiday Warehouse sale is on now. Share the joy of setting your table for family and friends and celebrating the holidays together again. Save up to 80% off tableware, kitchenware, home decor, and so much more. Shop 22 departments over 25,000 square feet, packed with over 200 brands you know and love. Find everything for entertaining and gifting. William Ashley's Warehouse Sale, 111 Crediview Road, Highway 400 in Langstaff. Closed Mondays.
PIN numbers, passcodes, social insurance numbers. If they make you wonder how private they are, here's two more numbers. 416-360-0740 or toll free at 1-866-740-4740.
And we're back with David S. Brody. The latest is Sheba's Revenge. We're talking about Oak Island, and you mentioned Zena Halpern, and this was he's the noted Oak Island authority expert who passed away. What was it, 2018 or no? It was earlier this year, wasn't it?
No, it was. It's been almost three and a half years, I believe. So I think 2018. I think
it was 2018. And so there's this map that Zena Halpern had. I think you have it printed in the book, Halpern's map, right? And this shows there's an arrow pointing to an island. It's not actually Oak Island. I think it's Frog Island, and there's a date on there, or it's not a date. Some people think it was a date, 1347. Now others are saying no, that's not a date. That 1347 has to do with navigation, or there's some controversy around that map, right?
Right. There, unfortunately, and I don't know if we have time to get too deep into all the Cremona document research she was doing, but no one has any originals of any of this stuff, and so a lot of it is, in my mind, the 1347 is the date somebody recopied this original map from 1179 or 1180. But for the purposes of the conversation tonight, on the map, the map is labeled in French, the island of Oaks, and then on the map is a specific point that's mentioned, the vault beneath the earth. And this map has been shown many times on the Curse of Oak Island show. For some reason, they've never bothered to dig under the vault beneath the earth. Actually, I know the reason. It's because they didn't, until very recently, didn't own that particular swath of land. It was part of the Nolan land, Fred Nolan's land. So only in the last, I think, 2 seasons have they actually owned that land to be able to access it. But it turns out that the spot on the map matches exactly the foot of Nolan's Cross. The very the boulder, the Nolan's Cross is comprised of a number of boulders, and the very bottom of the cross, the foot, there's a boulder, and that matches up where Zena's map shows the vault beneath the earth. And so in my story, that's where they go digging, looking for what they hope is going to be the Templar gold.
The vault beneath the earth. And you mentioned, or I think you mentioned the Cremona document, his Halpern's research on the Cremona document. And this is what kind of ties the Templars to Oak Island, right? It describes their journey to Oak Island and the Catskills you mentioned. Right,
the journey 1179 to 1180, where they stop off in what it described an island of oaks, and it's off the coast of what we now know as maritime Canada. It looks like Oak Island, and they continue on. They deposit, it looks like gold there, and they continue on and eventually end up in the Catskill Mountains. And most of the document deals with their time in the Catskills, but importantly, they do stop in off of Nova Scotia on their way into further south and further east. One of the things that they do when they're in the Catskills is they find or they deposit a scroll, which is the ketubah, the marriage contract between the Hasmonean princess Miriam of Migdal, which is basically Mary Magdalene, and Yeshua ben Yosef of Cana, which is, of course, Jesus, son of Joseph of Cana. So this scroll, this marriage contract, apparently is one of the things that they brought over, and that ties in with all the the legends of the Templars and why they were eventually put down by the church, and what great secrets did they discover when they were in Jerusalem, and all the Da Vinci Code stuff with Jesus and Mary Magdalene getting married, and all that. And again, we don't have time to probably get into all that stuff tonight, but that's where these maps come from. This whole pile of documents, which are loosely called the Cremona document, and within that document are maps. And this particular map of Oak Island with the vault is what I use to trigger the opportunity to dig at a spot that might have the Templar gold.
So on the TV show, they're preparing now to finally dig under that vault?
No, they're digging this season. They're digging. They're staying at the money pit, and they're digging with larger pipings. I don't know if they're going to. It's only been 2 episodes, I think, this year. I don't know if they're going to be digging under Nolan's Cross. One of the things that this TV show, and I'm not involved with it, so I can't speak to it firsthand, but it's almost like killing the golden goose. If they actually were to find the Templar treasure,
right,
then the show would pretty much end. Part of it is the longer they can draw this out and keep us all interested and continuing to make finds that lead to the treasure, the longer the series can continue. And so I've always thought that they are not necessarily interested in finding the treasure right away, because then what happens? This franchise is worth, it's the golden goose. It's the highest rated show I think History Channel has. And so I don't know how anxious they are to actually wrap things up. Now, I also know this year that the government of Nova Scotia has sort of jumped in and has restricted them as to what they can do, where they can dig. They had free reign for a long time, and now they are much more restricted bureaucratically as to what they can do.
All right, we'll take one final time out, David. Come back and discuss some more Oak Island, perhaps maybe even a little sneak preview of, well, I guess it's your previous book, Pillars of Enoch. Back with more of The Conspiracy Show. My name is Richard Serra. Don't go away.
Fasten your seatbelt and put your tray in the upright position. You're about to leave everything you know behind on The Conspiracy Show with Richard Serra from Zoomer Radio.
I don't need to tell you how important building and sustaining a healthy immune system is these days. And just in time, my good friends at Get the Tea are offering a special package called the Immune Builder. You get 1 month's supply of Life Change Super Tea. That's 8 bags. 1 bottle of Bioastin. That's 75 capsules. Now, Bioastin or astaxanthin is known as one of nature's most powerful antioxidants and provides a wide range of impressive health benefits. The Immune Builder also includes 1 bottle of potent C wild Alaskan sockeye omegas. That's 90 gel caps. And 1 copy of the book Natural Astaxanthin, Hawaii's Super Nutrient by Dr. William Sears. There's so much more than tea at getthetea.com. Get your Immune Builder right now. Not available in any store. Use the code UNLIMITED and all your purchases ship for free. The Immune Builder from getthetea.com.
But it came with a free waffle iron, so it kind of balances out. Oh, nice. I'm looking to combine them into one lower interest payment. Well, do you own your home? Sure do. Approved. Nice. Next question. Are you eating waffles right now? Maybe.
Alpine credits, where homeowners get approved. Nothing against waffles. They're a tasty breakfast treat. Alpine credits. Fiscal license 12616.
Shovel. Warm winter coat. Snow boots and 2. As Canadians, taking on winter is kind of our thing. But what about adding peace of mind to your winter checklist? With a CAA membership, you can take on winter driving confidently with 24/7 roadside assistance. Getting peace of mind this winter with a CAA membership? It's not just smart, it's winter-wise. Get your CAA membership or learn more at joincaatoday.com.
Fasten your seatbelt and put your tray in the upright position. You're about to leave everything you know behind on The Conspiracy Show with Richard Serra from Zoomer Radio.
Welcome back. Just a reminder, coming up in hour 2, Charlie Robinson will be here. And his new book is Hypocrisy, but it's spelt as in crazy, C-R-A-Z-Y. And right now, a few minutes remain with David S. Brody. The latest book is Sheba's Revenge. We're talking about the treasure of Oak Island. Any question in your mind that there is, in fact, Templar gold there, David?
Very much. I think if you had to pin me down, I would say that I believe that the Templars did deposit gold at Oak Island, but that later on it was taken away. I just don't think that an organization that is that powerful and that knowledgeable and that good at keeping secrets and maintaining itself would just sort of forget that they deposited all this treasure and lose track of it. I've heard one of the things that's floating around out there, and there's another set of journals, not related to the Cremona document, but another set of journals, again, that have not been substantiated. But those journals talk about how the treasure was taken in 1775 by a group of Freemasons who came up to Nova Scotia from Philadelphia and brought the gold back and used it to fund the American Revolution. And I think that's a really fun story, and it sort of resonates as something that makes sense if we believe that the Freemasons, were the successors to the Templars, and the Templars were early promoters of the sort of the American ideals of liberty and freedom of religion, and some of the things that we like to think the Templars were at the early stages of supporting during the Renaissance and the Enlightenment period. But that story would be a nice story. I don't know if it's true or not, but I big picture, I just can't believe that it would still be up there. I just can't believe they'd forget about it and have lost track of it and left it there.
Right. This idea of using that gold to fund the revolution, I think it was Sir Francis Bacon. Didn't he sort of refer to the New World as the New Jerusalem? So that might make sense then for the Templars to want to fund that project, right? Get the New Jerusalem off the ground.
Well, yes, the New Jerusalem, and sometimes also the New Atlantis. But yes, the same idea, which was that so many of our founding fathers in America, in the United States, were Freemasons, and they were promoting this ideal of this new experiment in civil rights and individual rights. And again, not that the Templars were 100% behind all of that, but they were partway there. They were starting to, they had been exposed to a lot of quote-unquote liberal ideas by traveling around the world. Remember, Europe was just coming out of the Dark Ages at this time, and none of these ideas had taken hold. And the Templars learned a lot about this stuff while traveling and brought a lot of it back to Europe. And many historians think you can trace the Enlightenment back to the ideals and ideas that the Templars brought back to Europe from the Middle East and the Far East and other places. And so the roots of all this can be traced back to the Templars. And it does make sense that the Freemasons, being the successors to the Templars, would have wanted to continue that experiment, or that New Jerusalem, or the New Atlantis, and that treasure would have been a perfect use for that treasure. It makes sense. Like I said, it's a nice story. I just don't know if it's true or not.
Right. I interviewed I think he's the great-grandson of Jesse James, who was on the program a couple of times, and he believes his great-great-grandfather, he faked his death, lived, I think, well into the 1940s. It might have been in Oklahoma City or someplace like that. And he believed his great-great-grandfather was also involved in Templar Treasure and had made a number of treasure maps, and they were adorned with interesting Masonic symbols and so forth. Have you heard about that story?
Yeah, I've seen that book. As a matter of fact, it's on my list of things I'd like for the Christmas this year. I haven't read it, but I've seen that story. But again, this goes back to what I said earlier, which is, all of us want to believe in those treasures. It's all of us old men. We want to find the child within us that still believes in the dream of buried treasure. It's hard not to be seduced by those stories, and they're fun.
It's true, absolutely. I flying home from Greece the other night, I finally got to see the Goonies from 1985. I'm a little late getting to some of these, but that's all about young kids looking for buried treasure.
Yeah, we all spent our age 9, 10, 11 before we discovered girls. Either playing sports or digging in our backyard looking for the treasure, or panning for gold in the brook or something. So,
That's it. On the YouTube live chat, YY is wondering, why don't they use, I think it's called SIRE radar, or SIRA radar, synchronous impulse reconstruction radar, to find the treasure at Oak Island?
I have no idea. I don't know what that is. But I'm guessing that they're privy to all the latest technology. I know they have a huge budget for that kind of stuff. I have no idea why, Gary Drayton doesn't have, a magic wand that does that as well. I'm sorry, I can't answer that one.
Right. I'm not sure if it's SIRE radar or SIRA. Anyway, I got to ask you, you mentioned we were talking about the Freemasons a little bit, which brings us to your previous book, which came out, I guess, this past spring. The Pillars of Enoch, Templars and the Melungian Legacy. What's that about?
The Melungians, yes. So the Melungians, they're a mysterious group of people who live in Appalachia, southern Appalachia, so Tennessee, North Carolina, Kentucky. And there are some famous Melungian people. Elvis Presley, probably the most famous. Tom Hanks, the current actor, is Melungian. Cher, the singer. Ava Gardner, the actress. But the thing about the Melungian is no one sort of knows where they came from. There was a Supreme Court decision in having to do with voting rights back in the early 1800s that declared that they were the descendants of the Phoenicians. And DNA tests sort of indicates that they're partly Portuguese, partly Cherokee Indians, partly Sephardic Jews, and partly North African, which is an interesting collaboration of people. But in my story, I start musing about those groups of people, And what you end up with is basically the vestiges. Again, for me, it always goes back to the Knights Templar. But the Templars, after they were outlawed, that sort of fits what they were. They were traveling. They were sailing across the Atlantic. They were pirates. They were in Portugal. They accepted a lot of Sephardic Jews in their order after they were outlawed. So, I started wondering whether you could trace the Melungeon people back to the Templars. And what's interesting about the Melungeon, and the way I trigger the story, is that it's pretty clear that the mother of Abraham Lincoln was Melungeon. And that would mean that Lincoln himself had perhaps African blood in him and Sephardic Jewish blood in him. And that opens up all sorts of interesting things when you start thinking about American history and how would that affect what we learn in school if it turns out that Abraham Lincoln, he wanted to free the slaves maybe because he identified with them, and that if you start looking at some of the, for example, his grandfather and a couple of his uncles were named Mordecai, which is clearly a Jewish name.
Right.
Even the name Abraham itself is generally a Jewish name, but it's just interesting to think that perhaps Lincoln had other things going on in his life that would have motivated some of his decisions. So that's what I use sort of to trigger that story. But the ancient Melungeon, the Melungeon people, to this day even, they're not quite sure where they descend from. But DNA testing is sort of honing in on that, and it seems to indicate that they are a conglomerate of people that had a similar path to America as potentially the Templars had.
Oh, it's remarkable. It's remarkable. Do you look back on your days, taking history in high school and thinking, my gosh, they were so off the mark. We just fed such a pile of malarkey.
I do, but I had a great second grade teacher. I remember raising my hand once as a little 8-year-old or whatever it was and saying, Mrs. North, why is the timeline between the Vikings and Christopher Columbus, why is it such a 500-year gap? I don't think I use the word gap, but why did nobody come back after the Vikings and before Columbus? And she looked at me and raised her eyebrow and said, that's a good question, David. Maybe someday you can answer it. So even as a little 7-year-old, 8-year-old, whatever I was, I had a great teacher who was saying to me, go figure it out. You're right. There's stuff missing. And to this day, I was thankful to Mrs. North who sort of put that in my head that I can go answer some of these questions. So yes, it is a shame that we didn't learn all this stuff, but it's also fascinating to start to fill in some of these gaps.
Well, and you've been doing that, David, quite nicely. So we've got Sheba's Revenge just available, I think, the last couple of weeks on Amazon. Just last week. Excellent. Well, congratulations. You've done it again, David, and always enjoy a visit from you, and we'll talk again soon, probably on Coast, I hope.
I hope so. It's always a pleasure to be with you, Richard. Thank you so much.
Likewise. David S. Brody. All right. When we come back, Charlie Robinson. We'll talk, hypocrisy, spelled C-R-A-Z-Y, surviving in a world of cultural double standards. My name is Richard Serra. This is The Conspiracy Show. Stay with us. Plenty of more show to come. Hour 2 coming up in mere moments.
Providing the evidence and letting you draw your own conclusions. This is The Conspiracy Show with Richard Serra on Zoomer Radio.
This is Zoomer Radio Toronto, CFZM FM and CFZM AM, owned and operated by MZ Media Incorporated.
From Toronto, Canada, Earth. The Conspiracy Show with Richard Sarrett on Zoomer Radio.
Hey, thanks for inviting me into your home, your long-haul truck, RV, camper, taxi, your parents' well-appointed basement with a simulated wood paneling, electric fireplace, and the painting of dogs playing poker, your loft, that greasy spoon just off the interstate, and your cabin in the woods. I'm Richard Sarrett, and I'm delighted to be back in my home studio here in Thornhill, just north of Toronto, Ontario, and bringing this program to you live. Quick programming note. Coming up next week, James DiEugenio, one of the foremost JFK assassination researchers, will be here. This will be the, 58th anniversary of the assassination of John F. Kennedy, President John F. Kennedy. Jim DiEugenio, incidentally, is the gentleman who wrote Oliver Stone's latest documentary on JFK. So who knows? Maybe Jim will bring Oliver Stone along with him onto the show. Well, probably not, but you never know. You never know. Jim and Oliver work pretty closely together. As a kid, I absolutely loved Mad Magazine. Alfred E. Newman, and terrific satirical magazine. A lot of it, as a 10, 11-year-old, a lot of it went over my head. My neighbors, we didn't have it in the house, but my next door neighbor was my best friend growing up. His older brother had a big stack of Mad magazines, and I would go over there, and we would. I used to like Spy versus Spy. And why do I bring this up? Well, incidentally, I just learned, actually, I didn't know that up until 3 years ago, Mad Magazine was still around. The final issue of Mad Magazine was published back in April of 2018. Think about that. It launched, I think, in 1952. 1952 to 2018. That's nearly 70 years. What is that, 66 years? That's quite a run. Alfred E. Newman was 70 years old. Who knew? So I mentioned this, Mad Magazine, because I'm looking at the cover of Charlie Robinson's book, Hypocrisy, Surviving in a World of Cultural Double Standards. And again, it's hypocrisy, C-R-A-Z-Y, hypocrisy. But when I look at the cover of the book, it reminds me a lot of Mad Magazine. There's Uncle Sam, looking a little worse for wear, and he's he's kind of bedraggled, and he's in a straitjacket in a rubber room, looking, well, kind of crazy. So we're going to delve into poor old Uncle Sam and the state of poor old Uncle Sam with Charlie Robinson. And Charlie has been with us before. Previously, he wrote the book, The Octopus of Global Control. And then after that, he co-authored another book called The Controlled Demolition of the American Empire. So tonight marks his third time on the program. And again, this one's called Hypocrisy, Surviving in a World of Cultural Double Standards. And when Charlie isn't writing books, he's the host of the Macroaggressions podcast, which can be found on iTunes, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Rockfin, YouTube, and Iconic. And he's also the co-host of the wildly popular Roundtable podcast, The Union of the Unwanted, with Sam Tripoli, a.k.a. Tinfoil Hat, and Ricky Verandas, The Ripple Effect, and Midnight Mike, OBDM. Charlie, welcome back to the program. How are you?
What, me worry? I'm great, Richard. Thanks for having me back. Yeah, we've got Uncle Sam right where he belongs, in a padded cell. I think after what we've witnessed over the last, 10 years in general, but the last 2 years specifically, I think he's right where he belongs.
Right. Tell me, who did the illustration for that?
A guy named Mike Farron. I saw his work, and it's funny you mentioned the Alfred E. Newman Mad Magazine, because that's what I was kind of going for. I didn't want it to be Jim Garrisoned or is that Ben Garrisoned out? Sorry, I got my Garrisons wrong. Where it's too noticeable, so I wanted to be kind of more of an obscure artist, and I saw some of his work, and I just immediately said, "That's my Uncle Sam guy. Would you be interested in doing this?" He said, "Tell me about the book," and I told him. He said, "Oh yeah, let's do it." So I wanted to have with that, but well, really all three of the books. I want you to just be able to take a look at the cover, and in 3 seconds go, I think I know what this is about. Let's do it. So if it's an octopus on top of the world for the first book, which was a logo idea that I borrowed from the National Reconnaissance Office because they had that slapped on the side of one of their satellites, that octopus around the world, and the text wrote, "Nothing is beyond our reach." And I thought, that's pretty scary. So I used that. The second book is Building 7 wrapped in the American flag, midway through going down as a controlled demolition of the American Empire. I think people can figure that out. And the new one just because it's got Uncle Sam on the cover, but let's not kid ourselves. It's not limited to Uncle Sam. I mean, this sort of insanity is spreading, and it's not confined to the United States. It's not confined to the Northern Hemisphere. It's happening a lot of places, and I think that people are tired of it, and they recognize it. They recognize the insanity. They didn't sign up for this. They want nothing. They want to be left alone, and yet the governments around the world are making it increasingly more difficult for people to be left alone. And so we're starting to see people frustrated, throw in 18 months of uncertainty with regards to viruses and jobs and inflation and all that, and you have a recipe for a lot of people to be very angry about the current situation.
Did you start writing this book during COVID?
I started writing this in 2019, but pre-COVID. Got to I'd started the Controlled Demolition book with Jeff Berwick the same year. I wrote a huge chunk of it, sent it over to Jeff, and while he was working on his part, I had a different idea for a different book. So I started on this one. I took a break, so I was kind of working on two books at once. When it got time for me to finish this one, I needed to go back, obviously, and incorporate the COVID component into the new book, because it's such a obviously important part. It's not just virus related, but it's the psychology behind governmental dictates and trust the science, and science with registered trademark, right. That science, and so there were a lot of components of the frustrations that Americans were feeling that were kind of coming out of the COVID narrative. But it's not to say that that's the only problem, or that that's the only thing that we need to talk about. Obviously, it sucks up all the air out of the room for sure. I mean, it's the only thing that's been, well, I shouldn't say it's the main thing that's been talked about for the last 18 months. So I have to mention it, but I also recognize that I didn't want to make it just a COVID book. So we get into a variety of topics. Obviously, the corporate media is at the top of my list of directing my anger towards them. We've got governments, we've got the woke lunatics that are doing their thing. So and organized religion and all that good stuff. So, wherever there's hypocrisy, and let's face it, it's pretty much everywhere. I wanted to make sure that that I addressed it in the book, including my own hypocrisy, right? I mean, we're all guilty of it. I'm not trying to point fingers and say that I'm above having hypocritical thoughts. In fact, the first time that it really occurred to me that I was saying one thing and doing something quite different was I kind of had a built-in excuse, but I was installing the baby monitor over my daughter's crib while I was right in the middle of the Edward Snowden disclosures about how everyone was spying. The NSA was spying on us and reading our emails. And I'm installing this thing going, yeah, but it's for her protection. I just need to watch her. And then I'm thinking, gosh, is this this must be how they rationalize it for us. Like, oh, it's for their protection. They're far too stupid to be able to handle themselves. We have to watch her.
Well, Charlie, your sin is hardly can be compared. What is that saying? A foolish consistency is the hobgoblin of small minds. I mean, we're all we're all hypocrites. You're right, but we don't have the guns, right?
Right. When my hypocrisy gets exposed, it's me installing baby monitors when I'm against surveillance state.
Exactly.
Right. When the government gets exposed for their hypocrisy, people die. Or
that's just it. That's it.
Yeah, and so though I have a I guess a well enough balanced sense of humor that I can laugh at myself, I don't find the government's hypocrisy charming. I find it very dangerous and insulting and frustrating and inconsistent. The rules for thee but not for me type of mentality. That rubs everybody the wrong way. So, I'm going to make a list with all of the governors and senators and people that got busted on their COVID vacations whilst in the middle of telling other people that they're not allowed to travel for holidays. So, I had to make a list of those people, right? They deserve to be dragged out in front of the general public and reminded of their rampant lies and have that sort of thing documented and footnoted so that people can double check my work and go see all of it. So though these topics are serious, the things that we're getting into in the book are relevant and important. It always comes from it has a comedic slant to it.
Yeah, it is. It's very funny, and it's also very stream of consciousness. Did you sit down and write just sit it, not all at once, obviously, but I'm in my mind's eye, you're sitting there, just, you can't type quickly enough to get it out. And you're writing huge swaths of this book all at once. Like if you could stay up for 100 hours, you'd be writing for 100 hours straight. Is that how the book came together? You just pour it out of you?
Okay, I think we've exposed that you are working for the NSA now, because there's no possible way you could have not. No, yes, I did. There were certain, didn't happen all the time, of course, but there were certain portions of the book where something happened, I sat down and I started writing, and a couple hours went by, and I feel like I came out of some sort of trance or ayahuasca session or something, you know what I mean? And I looked, and the screen was filled with all of these words that I had written. Sometimes really, I've had people ask about the format of writing the book and what was the most difficult part of writing the book. And frankly, the most difficult part of the book was trying to decide what to cut out. Because I could have gone on and beaten this horse to death multiple times with the hypocrisy of religious leaders and politicians and things like that. But so I had to narrow that down. The writing part was relatively easy. The editing part was the most difficult component because I had so much material to work with. There's so many people out there that are saying one thing and doing another thing, and so I kept writing up until the very last minute. I was going back in there trying to find as many relevant and recent articles that people could buy, could dig into in this. So I think a lot of people will laugh at the absurdity of it all. But probably walk away from the book a bit frustrated, because the things that I'm writing about, though, funny on the surface, they have real world impacts. I mean, these are the types of things that are going to matter to us moving forward. So if you write about Federal Reserve hyperinflating the currency during 2020 and creating 40% of all dollars that are in existence just in that 1 year, and we write about how this is unsustainable and kind of like a Ponzi scheme, people may snicker at that until they realize that they may be holding their assets, their net worth in US dollars. And if they are, now they have to, it stops being funny really quick when they start to realize that what's been done has been done to them. So trying to find that balance between waking people up, scaring them, but not scaremongering just for the sake of trying to scare, just trying to inform people of the reality of the situation, which is kind of scary without it being overly dramatic, was what I was going for. And I feel like the humor component of it will keep you hanging in there through the through the dark parts in the book where you want to just, throw your television set out the window, which you probably should do anyway. But you'll get to these points where you'll have this frustration. How are they allowed to do this? And then there'll be a joke in there, and then you'll get a good laugh out. It'll keep you hanging in. I kind of had to do it with the octopus book as well, because when you get into these dark topics that are really serious, you hope that somebody doesn't go, oh, this is just too much for me. So you got to kind of keep a little bit of a lightheartedness to it just to keep them hanging in there.
Right. We have to laugh, because otherwise we'd cry. Charlie Robinson is with us. The new book is Hypocrisy, Surviving in a World of Cultural Double Standards. And again, we should point out that it's hypocrisy spelled Hypocrazy, as in crazy. And how do we get a copy?
Amazon has the paperback and the Kindles. Digital versions can be found on my website, theoctopusofglobalcontrol.com. There's a part in there where you can just donate via PayPal, and I send you the digital version of the book. So people can go to my website and sort that out. But there's 480 footnotes in the book, and the reason, and it's not meant to be like an encyclopedia or anything like that, but I realized that while I was about a third of the way through the book, I better show my work on this one, because some of the stories and some of the examples I was giving were so preposterous and so unbelievable that I felt like there might be a point where people might think I was making it up. And so I said, I'm gonna make sure that I don't give anybody any place to go. If you think I'm making embellishing just for the jokes, I get it. I totally understand. It sounds, some of the things that are in the book are so nuts.
Well, for instance, here's one that I'm sure you had to do a citation because people wouldn't believe it. But Leonardo DiCaprio flying 8,000 miles in his private jet to pick up his environmental award.
They don't see it, though. That's the problem, is that they don't see it. He then left and spent a week on the 5th largest yacht in the world in the Mediterranean, which, look, I don't fault him for those things, right? If you're a movie star and you've got the money and you're flying in your private jet and you're doing all, and you're flying, you're cruising around the Mediterranean in a boat that puts off more carbon emissions than most cities, I get it. If you've got the financial ability to do that and you're not interested in saving the world or doing
right, but don't lecture us on.
Yeah, that's the point. That's the problem.
Right.
That's the problem. It's when you get him going up in front of the COP26 climate summit and meeting with all of these people, and he's gonna tell everyone, hey, listen, I'm gonna come up here and I'll speak as well at this event, and I'll tell everyone what we need to do to save the world, and then all 400 of us can fly out of here on our private jets and just go all and just pat ourselves on the back for such a job well done. So yeah.
Right. I mean, every day you just pick up the newspaper and you could keep writing volume after volume. This stuff practically, I won't say writes itself, because that's a discredit to you. I mean, you're putting it through, giving it a kind of a comedic lens. Otherwise, as I say, we'd have to cry about this stuff. But you mentioned COP26, and I don't know if this happened in Glasgow or it was in the G20, I guess, in Rome, where all of these leaders were driving around in their electric vehicles. Did you read about this? It turns out the electric vehicles, how did they power them? With diesel power generators.
I saw that. They had barriers up blocking the diesel power. Look, these people are hypocrites. They say one thing and do another thing. And that's not the biggest crime in the world. Again, it's not a big deal if your buddy does it to you or your friend does it to you, whatever. But these people have an intention of remaking society based on climate change. And they know that stuff isn't what they say it is. And they know that and then act accordingly. So it's theater to them, whether it's the mask theater. We've seen plenty of those videos of floating around this summer of all of them at the summits with their masks on for the pictures. And they're like, and we're out, and then everyone just takes their masks off. And it's like, this is it's theater of the absurd. It's theater when it comes to the climate component of it. But if it was left just there, I could just appreciate it for being ludicrous, and we could laugh at it. But the problem is that, of course, the decisions that are made at these summits are going to have real world impacts on us. We'll be the ones paying the price. We won't be getting the exemptions for, to be able to move freely around the world. But of course, these guys will. So it's, it's funny to a point, but then it takes on more. It won't be funny at some point when the things that they're talking about have now been implemented and they're being used against us under the guise of saving the planet, which they, of course, have no interest in doing.
All right, we'll take a quick time out. Charlie, stick with us. Back with more of my conversation with Charlie Robinson. The new book is Hypocrisy: Surviving in a World of Cultural Double Standards. We'll also take questions and comments from our YouTube live stream. And Ryan, you can put those together and send me a list of questions. And also, of course, we'll open up the phone lines as well. Back with more of The Conspiracy Show in 3 minutes. Don't go away.
The owners of the system are asleep. Now we can play The Conspiracy Show with Richard Serra from Zoomer Radio.
A childhood of poverty, and now he's a worldwide symbol of the ruthless billionaire mogul. He's Brian Cox, starring in Saga Succession, and he's made his character so vivid that some wonder where Brian Cox ends and Logan Roy begins. Find out in Zoomer Magazine. In an exclusive interview,
Hey there, I'm hard at work on another edition of Inner Sanctum, my free monthly newsletter. Inner Sanctum features my monthly brief, a column of my thoughts and opinions on what's happening in the world. It features a spotlight on a past guest, a look ahead to an upcoming episode of my weekly syndicated radio program, The Conspiracy Show. It features a look at this month in conspiracy and UFO history, and my Conspiracy Unlimited podcast episode pick of the month, and so much more. To get your free monthly newsletter, Inner Sanctum, delivered to your email inbox, just go to my website, strangeplanet.ca, strangeplanet.ca. Scroll down to the bottom of the page and click on Inner Sanctum and register. It's fast, easy, and again, absolutely free.
just covered. You know what I did? You got it, Jiffy. I hopped on the Jiffy app, and Jesse came out the same day. He cleaned the eaves and debris and got my yard ready for winter. No one can accuse me of being a sloppy neighbor. Get your phone prep taken care of with Jiffy. Download the Jiffy app or sign up at jiffyondemand.com. Use the code Zoomer and get $25 off your first job. Jiffy, fast and reliable home maintenance for less.
It turns out last season's All or Nothing was all about nothing. So what should we expect from Maple Leafs 2.0? Opinions on the blue and white are something we're never short of. The Naz and Wally Sports Hour, Sunday morning at 9 on Zoomer Radio.
Have you tried Pizza Bill's thinner, lighter, and tastier 11-inch extra thin crust gourmet pizzas? Order 2 11-inch extra thin crust gourmet pizzas for only $19.99. Order online at pizzabill.ca or dial #3636 from your cell.
Take a look around. What do you really see? This is where you can tell all about it. The Conspiracy Show with Richard Serra on Zoomer Radio.
Welcome back. Charlie Robinson is with us, and the brand new one is Hypocrisy: Surviving in a World of Cultural Double Standards, and hypocrisy spelled Hypocrazy. Hypocrazy. Look for the illustration of poor old Uncle Sam in a straitjacket on the cover, and it's available at Amazon. So there's hypocrisy. As you were pointing out, we're all capable of that. That's kind of a human trait. But again, people, let's call them the media elite, the ruling class. There's an element of sociopathy here. I mean, I think in order for these people to do what they do, if we were to do something like that and get caught, we would be shamed for life. I mean, we'd crawl into a corner somewhere and you'd never hear from us again. We'd be so embarrassed. But these people, they just get up and they do it again the next day and the next day and the next day, and there are no consequences. You have to be, I would think, a bit of a sociopath to be able to pull that off, don't you?
Oh, of course. It's required. It takes me back to that Noam Chomsky interview he did a while ago, where he was being interviewed by a guy, a UK journalist, and the UK journalist said something like, "What are you trying to tell me that I don't believe what I'm saying?" And Chomsky said to him, "No, what I'm trying to say is if you believe something different, you wouldn't be where you are." And I think with a lot of the media, or the media, politicians, whatnot, it is run by psychopaths. But you don't need to convince them to do these things. You don't need to train them to do these things. It's a lot like Chomsky's answers. If you believed doing things a different way, you wouldn't be there. You would be working at a gas station. You wouldn't be you wouldn't be Jeff Zucker, the head of CNN, who I would suggest is as qualified to run CNN as a guy that works at a gas station. But he's a psychopath of the highest order. So he doesn't have a problem instructing the people in his morning meetings to lie. He doesn't have a problem saying, well, we're not going to focus on this. You get the Project Veritas hidden camera videos where the guy has a CNN producer and he says, well, we're really just we're kind of done with the Biden stuff. We're going to pivot to climate change now. And you go, oh, okay. I mean, we knew you were going to do that. Of course, any of us that are paying attention understand this scam that's running on. But when the media makes the decision, we're done with this, we're now on to something new, I think that that's not how you would do it if you were on to something relevant and important. It's not that. The reason why Jeff Zucker knows that it's time to pivot to climate change is because it's not about it being relevant. It's not about it being important or a reasonable thing to talk about. It's about selling a narrative, and it's narrative time for climate change. So he got the memo, probably from the Council on Foreign Relations, maybe the Atlantic Council, German Marshall Fund, or Bilderberg. One of these groups is telling him it's time to get off of what you're normally doing, and let's talk about this new thing, which is the reason why these legacy corporate media companies move like herd animals, like once one of them moves, they all move in that direction. Once one of them picks up on a story, they all move. So you've got to keep an eye on the mainstream media. They are psychopaths and pathological liars of the highest order. But an interesting has been happening lately, and that is that they've told so many lies that they can't keep track of them all anymore. And the funny thing about the internet, for better or for worse, is that it keeps
forever.
track of it keeps track of what you've said. So when you've got like CNN putting the CDC director on and they're saying one thing, they're saying, hey, if you take this injection thing, you won't get COVID. And everyone's looking around going, I don't think she's allowed to say that, but she said it on CNN, and then a couple months later, CNN says, well, we never said that. And you run videos. It's like, well, would you like me to show you the video of you having them say that? And I said, well, that we don't, things have changed. The science has changed.
Exactly.
New information.
Yeah, you can't catch them in the lie because they just they reframe the question or move the goalposts. Well, that's not what I meant. Or, you're too dim to understand what I was really saying. There's no accounting. There is no, there's no payback for these people. They just continue to get away with it. And that's what's so demoralizing, I think, for the rest of us peons, is that the media class and the ruling class, first of all, there's no opposition. I don't know, like up in Ontario here, for example, we've got the Progressive Conservative Party, and they're all for lockdowns and vaccine mandates. And the opposition, instead of pushing back and saying, hold on, maybe, there's another way. No, they want to lock down harder. Right. That's the opposition. So, what are poor slobs like us to do? And then the media are, instead of, trying to hold them to account, they're cheering them on. They're cheering them on. Yeah. So there's nobody speaking for us great unwashed.
No, and denying reality while they do it too. As you see, 100,000 people marched past the BBC's office. BBC doesn't report on anything, you know. And of course, this is happening all over the place. Melbourne, you can look at the front page of Melbourne newspaper this morning after they had 100,000 people march. Not a word about it, right? So the media then gaslights the general public by telling them, either directly or by just refusing to cover the stories, what you see out there, what you're trying to make us aware, that doesn't exist. We're not talking about that. And there's a segment of the population that has been unfortunately conditioned to believe that if it doesn't appear on their nightly news, then it isn't happening. And consequently, if it does appear on your nightly news, then it is happening exactly the way that the nightly news says it's happening too. So that's dangerous. So there's a lot of gray area when it comes to the truth in the media. And here in the United States, Obama did something that was very unusual. It kind of flew under the radar, but he passed something called the Smith-Mundt Modernization Act of 2012. And what that did is it amended the original Smith-Mundt Act that came out in 1948, which prohibited propaganda to be used inside America on Americans. And what Obama's law did, that was stuffed into the NDAA and passed along in 2013 with everything else that had nothing to do with this, his law said, no, we're going to allow for a certain amount of propaganda to be used on Americans in America through the media. Good luck figuring out what percentage of your nightly news is that propaganda and what percentage is not, because it's all mixed in there like information sausage, and you get to try and figure out where the lies are. So I would suggest that Obama didn't change the law legalizing propaganda if he didn't intend to use some propaganda. So that's where we get down, to where we are right now. If you have a conversation or even a debate with somebody in your circle that's like a normie, so to speak, remind them of that. Remind them, they say, well, I don't know if the media, the media doesn't get everything right, but I don't know that they're necessarily lying to you. Say, no, they took the extraordinary step of legalizing lying to you in 2013. So they're going to be lying to you. It's not a matter of if they're going to do it. The question is just about how much.
This level of coordination now, though, we have between the ruling class and the media class, this is unprecedented. Yes, there was always some corporate control and a concentration of media ownership, and we all know the story of how 27 media companies became 12, and then now it's 5 or 6 or whatever the number is. But even, let's say, going back 10, 15 years ago, there was some pushback from the media. Was there a pivotal moment, do you think? Can we sort of mark a line in the sand when it all changed, when the media became the media party, basically, and a cheerleader for authoritarian regimes in this country?
I think when Obama came in, I think that the media in the United States was terrified of Dick Cheney and the Bush administration, and they were terrified they were scared of these guys. They still had an adversarial relationship a little bit with the administration. But once Obama got into office, the media felt like their guy was there, and it felt like a blending of the mainstream corporate media and the White House. And it wasn't limited to just the media blending with the White House. Social media blended with them as well. Because I put a chart in the book of all of the people from the Obama White House that now have jobs at Facebook, very high level jobs at Facebook. So what we're seeing is, it used to be that there, like I said, there was an adversarial sort of relationship between the press and the government, and they had to keep a check on one another, and they knew the CIA was infiltrating the media through Operation Mockingbird, and we knew about that. That wasn't a big secret. But you're right, it seemed like there was some pushback, but that changed. That changed a little over 10 years ago, and now it's just look at the leaked emails of Hillary Clinton talking about, can we get Maggie Haberman, who's a reporter? Maggie always writes good stories about us. Maybe we can get Maggie in here. We can get her to write a good story about us. So they've always been manipulating and sweet talking the press, and sort of, you scratch my back, I'll scratch yours. But it's now turned into there's no checks and balances. The media is fully captured. And they were captured before, but like you said, you felt that there was a bit of pushback. Trump came in, and Trump broke the media's brains. For all his insanity, and there was plenty of it, what he did to the mainstream media in general, and CNN in particular, was outstanding, because he reminded the general public that they are fake news. I was never a Trump fan, and I'm not on the red team or the blue team. But when he said that, I thought, good. Now everybody's, obviously the people on the right are going to listen. The people on the left will never listen to anything Trump said because they hated him so much. They were blinded to that. But in actuality, he was correct on that point, at least, that the mainstream media is fake news. They're fake news because that's their job. That's their whole point of being in existence. They're not in existence to get great ratings, because my business part, I work in real estate too. My business partners in real estate, they had their own home renovation show on HGTV, just a simple home renovation show. In
Charlie,
Vegas.
sorry, pardon the interruption. I'm just looking at the clock here. I'm a little bit late for a break, so we'll take a quick time out, come back, and we'll pick up on that point. Charlie Robinson, Hypocrisy, Surviving in a World of Cultural Double Standards. Back with more right here on The Conspiracy Show. Don't go away.
In a democracy, we elect officials so we can sleep at night. So why are you up? 416-360-0740 or toll free at 1-866-740-4740.
Welcome to the Neighbor Good. Welcome to Michael Garrett Hospital, where a world of healthcare is just...
Here's a resolution for 2021. Reduce stress and enhance your immune system. ESS 60 from C60 Evo. C60 is the carbon-60 molecule known to deliver more than 172 times the power of vitamin C. 172 times. ESS 60 is the purest form of C60, a known antiviral, antibacterial, and anti-inflammatory remedy that works. ESS 60 neutralizes free radicals from cell metabolization and external toxins to help minimize inflammation and maximize detoxification. Further, people report better sleep, more energy, and renewed mental clarity when they take our ESS 60 organic oil. To order your miracle molecule ESS 60, go to c60evo.com/Richard-Serrett. c60evo.com/Richard-Serrett. Buy now and save 10% by using the coupon code EVRS at checkout. Again, use the coupon code EVRS at checkout.
Previously on Dave's Corner Garage.
We have to listen to our friend Ed Onbeck and buy from a registered dealer, because if you buy one of those stolen cars, you meet a guy at a donut shop, and then the police come to your house weeks later and tow it away, you have no recourse at all.
What, again with the donut shops? I have no idea where Alan buys his crawlers, and it's probably for the best. Join us for Dave's Corner Garage every Saturday morning at 10 on Zoomer Radio and at davescornergarage.com. Presented by Triangle Tire.
You're listening to The Conspiracy Show with Richard Serrett from Zoomer Radio.
Hey, welcome back. Just a reminder, next week on the program, Jim DiEugenio will be here, noted JFK assassination researcher. He wrote Oliver Stone's latest documentary on JFK, and hopefully, maybe, you never know, Jim might bring Oliver on the program, but I'm not going to hold my breath. A bit of a long shot. Anyway, Jim will be here for the full 2 hours, 58 years since JFK was assassinated. Also, again, I want to shout out to Deep, Paul, and Tim Sullivan. two of my Patreon supporters in the Star Chamber tier. Thank you so much for your generous contributions. It really makes a big difference on the program, and I'm sincerely touched by your generosity. Charlie Robinson is with us. Hypocrisy, surviving in a world of cultural double standards. We were talking about the media and how it's not about ratings. I mean, if it were, obviously, you know, Don Lemon and Chris Cuomo would be long gone, and who's the other fellow, Stelter, they have no ratings. I mean, I could open the window here and shout out the window, and probably more people would hear me. So
that was my point to the story of the show that my business partners and I were doing, just a home renovation show for HGTV. Well, we would look at the ratings for that. We did that for 3 years. Our ratings for this obscure show that ran on a Thursday night that, you know, was doing pretty good but not killing it, our ratings were double CNN's.
Wow.
Double. They're and you know, so they've got the studios and thousands of employees and $1 million anchors and all of this stuff. And all of this stuff for what? It can't be for... You're not getting the best quality anchors if you've got Don Lemon and Brian Stelter and the like. So what is it about? Is it just about people that'll play ball? Well, and a Zero Hedge article came out a couple days ago that said that there's about to be a big shakeup at CNN with the on-air personalities. So if there is a God out there, please, I don't ask you for much, but please just go ahead and make this happen as soon as possible. Thank you very much in advance.
Earlier you were saying, you know, you were talking about some of the things that Trump did that were good, and one of them was, you know, pushing back hard against the fake news media. But then you said, you know, you're not blue or red. You know, I recently spoke with Mickey Willis, who wrote Plandemic, and he was telling me, you know, he was a hardcore lefty. He was a Bernie supporter up until, you know, he started investigating this whole COVID thing, and he had this awakening because he realized that the only people pushing back against COVID are people sort of right of center. And I'm not talking about, you know, Republicans necessarily, because we have the rhinos and so forth, but just conservative people, salt of the earth people, rural people, the only ones, you know, standing up and saying, hell no, I'm not gonna vaccinate my 7-year-old. They have a statistically 0 chance of getting COVID, or dying from COVID rather, statistically 0 with no underlying conditions. But if they take a jab, they have like 1 in 5,000 chance of coming down with myocarditis. That's heart damage. And it seems that all of these people that are pushing back tend to be right of center. Are you coming around to that same kind of conclusion?
I am. It's an interesting thing. I think it has to do with your level of trust in the media. Your level of trust in the media is, you know, directly proportionate to your level of trust in the vaccine. And of course, my level of trust in the media is 0. So I think you can extrapolate how I fall on that spectrum when it comes to the shots. But you know, it shouldn't be. It is, but it shouldn't be a political debate when we're talking about medicine. And yet it's turned into that. It's turned into, you know, I put a chart in the book talking about masks. It was just bullet points. It was like the stages of masks. It started with, don't wear the mask, they don't work, you know. And then it was, well, they don't work, but don't buy them because we need the hospital workers to be able to get them and everything. We don't want you to take them all and create a supply shortage. The last thing on the list of the evolution of the mask debate was, I wear a mask so that people don't think I'm a Republican. You know, you're like,
exactly.
Wow,
yeah, it's the ultimate virtue signaling, isn't it?
Right.
I wear masks because
science.
I care more than you do.
Right. Yeah, it's an interesting thing. It's a virtue signaling component to this that says, I'm more obedient than you. It did an interesting thing. It deputized morons into having a purpose in life. You know, guys and women that were sitting around not doing really much before this whole pandemic kicked off. they were approached by the media and the government and the Faucis of the world and said, listen, we've got to wear the masks. We've got to social distance. If all of us do it, it'll all go back to normal. We're going to need your help. These people heard, I'm important. I now have a purpose. And so they go out there with the belief in their head that they're going to do their part. Not a bad thing, right? To be fair, doing your part to make sure that other people don't get hurt is not a bad thing. But they did that at the expense of reason and logic and actual science, not bot science, but real science. They checked their brain at the door and then went out and called the police on people for having too many cars in your neighbor's driveway on Thanksgiving. I mean, this is insane. And so it did something, it really worked on the social justice warrior component of this, because those people are obsessed with making everything a level playing field, which is unrealistic and unnecessary. But that in their mind, they're going to do whatever they can to make it fair for everybody. So they were whipped up into a frenzy because finally they were important. They had something to do. And so I feel like people that took on that role of enforcer or brown shirt or whatever you want to call them, those are the people that are going to be extremely dangerous in the next stage of this evolution, which is when you get to the climate component and you have the same sort of mentality, the same sort of media fueled insanity where people
they're
are
shifting
all,
those gears now. The climate lockdowns are coming. We'll take one final time out. Charlie, stick with us. Deputizing morons. I love it. Charlie Robinson, Hypocrisy, Surviving in a World of Cultural Double Standards. Back with more in a minute.
Poking holes in the darkness. Take a look around. What do you really see? This is where you can tell all about it. The Conspiracy Show with Richard Serrett on Zoomer Radio.
And a few minutes remain with Charlie Robinson. His latest is Hypocrisy, Surviving in a World of Cultural Double Standards. And again, hypocrisy spelled HYPO, and then crazy, CRAZY, hypocrisy. I want to just crib here from your book, Charlie, Insanity of the Woke Mob. You're right. It's worth pointing out that being woke is not the same thing as being awake. In fact, most people that think of themselves as woke are more asleep than others due to their focus on a small sliver of society at the expense of the big picture. The woke mob is like a swarm of piranhas that destroy everything in their path until there is nothing left, then turn on each other because all they know is destruction. There is no negotiating with them. They cannot be reasoned with using logic or facts, and if someone bows down to them once, they will demand it forever. It's not a group of it is not a group advocating for fairness in any fashion, despite what they might proclaim. In societal terms, the woke mob seeks to destabilize the country by creating chaos. Then once things are busted up, they'll attempt to insert their insane policies into the culture to transform it into the paradise that they are seeking. I love that analogy that the woke mob is like a swarm of piranhas. But
just ask Jordan Peterson.
Yes, indeed.
Recently, when he said that I took the jab so that they would leave me alone, and they didn't leave me alone. Yeah, that's what happens. You never take the knee.
Exactly. Never apologize. Never take the knee. That's right. That's right. But as you point out, though, I guess the good point is that once they're finished, they're like mad dogs. Once they finish attacking you, when there's no one else to attack, they attack each other, and ultimately they devour themselves. What stage are we in? Because we are starting to see these civil wars within certain groups. So, for example, now within the LGBTQ plus, or whatever the acronym is up to now, I'm not sure. But now you've got, once you had radical feminists that were aligned with these groups, and now the radical feminists are concerned about, women-only spaces, and you have trans activists that want, transgendered biological males who identify as women to compete in women's sports. You've got they want to be allowed into rape shelters, or rape counseling, or domestic abuse shelters, into women's prisons. So now you've got this fissure happening. You've got these civil wars popping up all among this once homogenous group that they all kind of hung together. Now they're slowly breaking up. They're fighting. There's a lot of infighting.
I think the people in that community that were actually marginalized by society for years and years and years, the trans community that was a very small segment, very small trans community, who, for whatever reason, they were born in the wrong body, they have both sex organs or something. It's got to be a tremendously difficult existence. High school, college, meeting what kind of relationships do I have with it? I can't even imagine. I wouldn't pretend to know what they're going through. And most of my frustration isn't actually directed at those people. Those people are doing the best with the situation that they currently have. But I think they're tired of the other people coming in and watering down their righteous frustration with the system, or with their push to grant them, to gain additional rights for the trans community. That we need to take care of the people that need it. We do need to do that, but
they're deserving of respect and protection. They need to be absolutely. Of
course. But when you come out and say that you're pansexual for breakfast and you're gender fluid at lunch and you're non-binary at dinner, people are going to laugh at you, and rightly so, because what you're doing is you're pretending that you're all of these things, and to that trans person who's actually fighting this fight and has the anxiety every day of which bathroom do I go? Do I look enough like a woman to go into this? I mean, it's got to be really frustrating. And then to see all of these other people that don't really have much of an excuse to be this up in arms the way they are, I think it's insulting. I think the trans community that sees that is insulted by it. The gay community has ditched these people a long time ago. They want nothing to do with them. So it's an interesting it's interesting to see that it's not it's there's no solidarity in the woke community. I mean, we're watching 3-shot people turn on the 2-shot people now, right?
Yes,
You know, so
yes.
like
It's the vaccine caste system.
right. It is. And so what the thing is, it's like, if you wanted fairness and equality for everyone, I'll listen. But that's not what they want. They want retribution, and they want punishment, and they want to be taken. They don't want equality. They want to be prioritized. And people see that and they go, this isn't about fairness. This is about you wanting yours. And so it's not an ideology that's going to last for much longer. And when you have 56 different genders that you can pick from on Facebook, it's rightly going to be mocked, you know. So you're in a weird spot where it's like, you want to, you know, you need to kind of goof on these people because they're not serious people. But also you recognize that by doing that, there are going to be some serious people in that group that unfortunately are going to go down with the ship because they do need our protection. They do need, people to be reminded to not be awful to them. But that's, you're not, the woke mob is not helping the cause. They're doing what they do, which is they're really good at getting publicity, but there's not much substance behind it. So, and once you just sort of pick at it a little bit, what you realize is that these people aren't serious people.
Well, and it would appear that they may have overplayed their hand finally with, let's say in particular, with CRT, critical race theory in the schools, and they have awoken the sleeping giant. And we're seeing evidence of that, of course, a couple of Tuesdays ago with the election in a very deep blue state like Virginia now, Republican governor, and they are crediting parents. It's not about Democrat and Republican anymore. You've awoken the sleeping giant of parents. That's a pretty big.
I think you mean domestic terrorist, Richard. I think you mean domestic terrorist. Sorry.
There you go. Hypocrisy, surviving in a world of cultural double standards. Charlie, great speaking with you. Terrific book. Love the cover as well. And once again, how do we get a copy?
You can find my book on Amazon in paperback and as a Kindle. You can find the digital version if you want to bypass Amazon and come to me directly. You can do so at the website, theoctopusofglobalcontrol.com. Just donate $10 or more in PayPal. I'll send you the book. So
fantastic. And what are you working on next?
Oh boy, I really want to turn The Octopus into an 8-part television series. So I'm talking to people about that.
Wow, fantastic. And how do we listen to the podcast? Macroaggressions.
Macroaggressions is available in audio format wherever podcasts are served, and in video format, you can find it on David Icke's platform Iconic. It's over on Rockfin, Odyssey, and depending on the guest, sometimes on YouTube.
All right. Charlie, great speaking with you again. Thanks for hanging out.
Thank you, Richard.
Charlie Robinson. All right. Back next week with Jim DiEugenio, the 58th anniversary of JFK. Thanks to Carlos and Ryan. Couldn't do it without you boys. Thank you so much. Back next week, as I say. In the meantime, don't be afraid. There is nothing concealed that won't be revealed, and nothing hidden that won't be made known. What you hear in the dark, speak in the light. What I say in a whisper, proclaim from the housetops. Move over, Aphrodite. I'm coming home. Good night.